When I look back to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and I mentioned this, he wrote about Vietnam. He said that if America was to succumb to its spiritual death, the autopsy would read Vietnam. I would say that it would read Gaza now. You have the flag march, the Jerusalem flag march, where extremist settlers are let loose and wild on Palestinians by the thousands, chanting things like Muhammad is dead, we're going to murder you Arabs, all with the protection of the state, with Israeli soldiers. And throughout this time, it's like something bad is going to happen. And then 2023 comes along. You had 13,000 settler units in 2023, a plan of 13,000 settler units, the most in the history of the occupation, the most racist and extremist government, Israeli government, that you have ever had. And people don't realize that in 2023 alone, over 600 Palestinians had already been killed. It just doesn't make Western headlines. And so if you wonder why the American public sees this so much differently than the rest of the world, it's because American media shows the American public something so much different than what the rest of the world is shown. And so this was a pressure cooker. This was going to explode. It is extremely predictable. You've given people absolutely no hope. Many people are not seeing Columbia University, 2 IDF soldiers, former IDF soldiers, spraying Palestinian protesters with skunk water, which is what the IDF uses on Palestinian protesters and sometimes on worshipers on their way to Masjid al-Aqsa, which has multiple health repercussions. And so I was reading about how one of the students that was sprayed on campus at Columbia, Palestinian student, has showered at this point of us doing this podcast 11 times, cannot get the smell out of her, has suffered all sorts of health issues as a result of being sprayed. Again, people are not seeing the other side here. People are not seeing what we've had to deal with at these protests. Have reduced our casualties in Palestine to a number. The number is hundreds a day, over 30,000 people. We're averaging 10,000 people a month. The fact that they've been turned into faceless numbers with no stories, with no humanity, makes it that much more important for us to tell their stories here and to remind the world that you've lost your humanity if you can watch this unfold and not even have the decency to call for a ceasefire. I mean, that's where we've reached. That's how low it is right now. Calling for a ceasefire has now become radical. So we have to remind the world that if you're okay with the demolition of an entire town or a city or whatever it is that you want to call Gaza, because it wasn't always the Gaza Strip. But if you're okay with this and you're okay with this casualty count every single day, it's not just them who are being killed. It's your hearts that are dying. I could have made the excuse for you maybe in the first 2 weeks, that you hadn't seen enough. But with all social media suppression across all platforms, there isn't a single platform that hasn't suppressed Palestinian voices. With all that suppression, there are enough videos at this point of children whose heads have been blown off, of children walking around without limbs, of parents carrying their kids in bags, not body bags, grocery bags, because they don't even have body bags, and screaming out and saying, "Why are you doing this to me? Make it stop." And you come back and you tell that person, it's Hamas's fault. Where is your humanity? Where is your sense of decency? Isn't that the logic of the so-called terrorism that you condemn? It's incredibly lazy to say that anti-Zionism or that anti-occupation is anti-Semitic. First and foremost, the Palestinians are a Semitic people. That's number one. The Muslim community has been at the forefront of condemning anti-Semitism. We have stood in front of synagogues. We have stood with the Jewish community when the Jewish community is attacked. This is about occupation. This is a story of a colonial entity that has driven us out of our homes and has done so in such a way that has forced us to try to be the voice of a people that are being exterminated overseas right now. This is not an anti-Semitic movement. This is a pro-freedom movement.